Welcome to the Voices for Voices podcast, sponsored by Redwood Living. Thank you for joining us today. I am Justin Allen Hayes, founder and executive director of Voices for Voices, host, and humanitarian. You can learn more about Voices for Voices on our Instagram page, Facebook, YouTube, and our website, voicesforvoices.org. Voices for Voices is a 501c3 nonprofit charity organization that survives solely on donations. So if you're able to, please consider heading over to voicesforvoices.org to help us continue our mission and the goal and dream to help 3 billion people over the course of my lifetime and beyond. Or you can send a donation to the mailing address of Voices for Voices at 2388 Beckett Circle, Stowe, Ohio 44224. Are you or somebody you know looking for a volunteer opportunity? You can reach out to us today via our email at president@voicesforvoices.org. I founded Voices for Voices to provide a platform for folks to share their stories with others as we work to break the stigma around mental health, accessibility, and disabilities, helping get people the help they need while also helping them prepare or transition into the workforce with the Voices for Voices Career Center, where we connect talent with opportunity for job seekers and employers alike from coast to coast and in every industry and job level. Today, we are grateful to be joined by Bud Perry. I want to take a little bit of a step back, so how I know our guest today to be helpful for the audience of knowing how those connections are made. So actually through my wife, Charlene, she had worked for many years with Bud at one of her places of employment and one of Bud's as well. Knowing that careers and job changes, they come over the course of time, and through that connection and that relationship at work, one evening we had an extended conversation on Facebook Messenger, just about random topics and ideas. So when our podcast was switching over from audio only to now where we're also television, YouTube, as well as all the audio platforms and through the transcripts for those that would like to read. I knew that I wanted to at least ask Bud if he would be interested in joining the conversation for an episode. So I would like to introduce Bud Perry with us today, and want to thank you for joining the Voices for Voices podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I have more of a face for audio, but
me as well. Yeah, so for our audience, friends, family, colleagues, really from here and across the world, really. Do you want to get into maybe some of your background,
Sure.
kind of leading into where you are today, and obviously closing how people can get in touch with you and find out more about what you do, what you're a part of, and
Sure.
and might be able to meet you at a future event.
Right. Well, I originated from Oregon. My entire family settled there in the 1700s. They came across on the wagon train. Half of them did, the other half died of dysentery. That's a
Yeah.
1980s joke, computer joke. Let's see, currently, we started a company a couple of years back that do events, specifically that feature drag queens, which can be somewhat controversial in some areas. southern Ohio, maybe. That's very rural. But it's been very successful. One of the drag queens we talked to, I think it's been 2 years ago now, said, why aren't you doing drag? And I thought, I don't have any interest, which isn't exactly true, because my father was very much into Halloween and dressing up, and so I got that bug. And so to me, that's what it is. It's a costume, and then you can do a performance. I usually do a little bit of stand-up, and I introduce the other queens who dance and stuff. I'm a little too old to do a lot of those kinds of stunts that they do. They do those death drops and things, and my knees would never handle that. So I'm better just standing and talking into a microphone usually. But I do drag. I do it as a Candy Dish is my persona. I took the name Candy from my mother because that was actually her name. And so it was a little ode to her. From my father, I got diabetes and a heart condition.
Oh.
So, equal contribution.
Yeah.
But it's really taken off. We found kind of a home base in Lakewood at the Bottle House, and with Eugene's kitchen providing the food. So we do brunches on every last Sunday of the month. We do drag bingo and I'm not in drag for those, I think it's every second Wednesday, third Wednesday. It's on the website,
yeah, it's on the
UncleLuluPresents.com.
Yeah.
So there's a whole calendar. We also are now starting up art classes. We have a drag queen who majored in art at school and painting. So they're going to be doing that along with, we have a drink sponsor who turns out does this kind of stuff as well. Speaking of which, we're going to be doing cocktail making classes. So we're starting to fill up the calendar.
Yeah.
We are doing a charity event in February. It's a drag bingo. It's on a Tuesday, maybe, I think. It's on the website. And that's going to be for the Democratic Club. And it's going to be at the Bottle House in Cleveland Heights, which is the east side. So we're branching over the river.
Yeah. So when the different events and the sponsors, how does that come about? Do you do the reaching out, or due to events, people finding out about you?
For the most part, we do ticket sales. So then, we try to put out posters, and we were on Eventbrite, but they take such a large chunk of the tickets that we kept having to raise the price, and now they've raised their price again. So we've stopped using that, but that was another method that people were getting hold of tickets. Okay. For the most part, my husband is more the promoter. He gets on Facebook, Instagram. We are branching into TikTok. That is going to be the next big thing.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Everybody is.
Yeah.
As long as it stays, and the Congress doesn't shut it down.
Right.
But that's mostly it. Yeah. If we're getting into talks of a little bit of mental health, I mentioned my father was really into Halloween, and I remember early on in life, one of my friends said, you seem to have a lot of conflict with your father. Do you think that's what made you gay? And I was like, the exact opposite. I think that me being gay has opened my eyes to things that sets me at odds with my father. I will say, though, as time progressed, my father became more and more progressive, and his eyes were opened, and we got along just fine. But growing up, there were times when he worked, we were very rural Oregon, and he worked at a plywood mill, so it was kind of tough, leatherneck kind of thing. And so I heard a lot of racist jokes, and even as a kid, I thought, this just doesn't seem right. Yeah. And as I started getting friends who were people of color, for instance, or Latinos, different languages, I started realizing, these are all people.
Yeah.
And so then I really knew that those jokes and things that my dad would say were wrong. And like I say, as time progressed, he started realizing that too, and he left that world. So everything was fine. So taking a step back, doing drag, it's so painful. I cannot, I hate wearing the shoes. I don't like, the bra it's a necessity, but it's awful. I feel so sorry for women to have to do all that. It is a costume for me. It doesn't fulfill anything in me other than being out in public to do stuff. I'm an extrovert. There are people that put it on and go, "Oh my gosh, this feels good. This is my home." You know, and there's body dysmorphia, and there's all these things plugged into it. So when I first started doing drag, my sister called me and she goes, "I just have one question: is this a whole lifestyle, or whatever you're wanting to do, or what?" And I said, "It's just a costume. It's just a performance. That's what it is for me."
Yeah, and it goes to show that there are different areas that within that doesn't have to be, if somebody's thought process is thinking, "Oh, well, if I hear that, it's all the way and it's the lifestyle," but it doesn't have, it doesn't have to be, it can be.
It can be, it doesn't have to be. We have, in our events, we try as much as possible to make certain to include drag kings, which are women born at birth as a woman and perform as a man. Not always. Some drag kings and many drag queens now are what they call AFAB, which is a female at birth, or assigned a female at birth.
Okay.
And they are performing as women in high drag. Kind of reminds me of Phyllis Diller or or Cher at many times.
Yeah.
You strip those wigs and all that layer of makeup and the eyelashes and all the gowns and things, and you would never recognize them.
Oh my God.
That's drag.
Yeah. Talking a little bit about the workforce and the workplace and mental health and ethics and just that whole conglomerate of things that comes with going to work with maybe some people you like, some people you don't like, that and all that. Through your career, what type of dynamics have you seen have been helpful and maybe detrimental to somebody's mental health or just the organization as a whole?
Sure. We just got out of a situation where my boss had hired a very toxic employee. It was very, very difficult. And the most unfortunate thing was maybe because I'm usually the one who helps train people and gets them going, and typically fairly amenable and jovial. I got placed with this person for every project, and it really was difficult, and I kept complaining about it and saying we need to make a change. That was hard. It wasn't until after they were gone that I found out every other person that they encountered had also complained. It took far too long. Looking back many years ago, I was working for a firm, architecture, and there was a man they had hired for sales.
Okay.
But he didn't really do anything, and it was very visible. You could see he wasn't doing any work, never making any phone calls, just walking around with his coffee mug. And what that did was it made all the other employees think, why am I working so hard when this guy's not doing anything and he's getting paid so much more than I am? So that was its own toxicity. He was a nice guy, but it itself was a bad thing that happened. And it drives employees away. It makes them not really work that hard, do the quiet quitting thing. It's always difficult if you have some kind of toxicity in the workplace. And some employees don't know that, I'm going to say probably most of them don't know that they're toxic. Charlene and I had our own boss that was most of the time really pleasant actually on the outside, but would institute all these policies that were so confining. If you were gone to the restroom for more than like 10 minutes, she'd go on a hunt for you.
Right.
So, why? And had no idea that was something she was causing, a lot of angst in her employees. But
it's like extra energy is being expended for something that isn't work. I mean, it's work related because it's happening at work, but the activity itself is impacting whether it's hearing that an individual talk and not really doing their job. It's like they're carrying around the mug and the typical office space, Lumberg and having that. Like what are they doing? Come in on Saturday and Sunday and that satire or that yeah, I guess however that's classified, and then some of the stuff is so funny, but it's so funny because it actually happens.
It rings true. Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, like that's kind of extreme. It's a little bit out there, and that's one thing. Talking and with my students is trying to share like some of those type of things. Like the workplace isn't always going to be, it's not always fun and games, and there's that aspect, but you need to find yourself as an individual. And I think, especially with you and going through with your father, kind of at the beginning and button heads, you're like, look, I'm kind of where I'm at, and so this is me, and there's going to be external factors and forces, but once you kind of got there, it made your life a little bit easier because you're like, all right, well, I don't have to like pretend and to make somebody happy to say something. And I think that happens at work too. Is, sometimes we pretend like, how are you doing this morning? Good morning. And I'm telling Charlene about some of those things. Like I got yelled at because I didn't. I'm not like the most like happy person in the morning. Like I'm not the person that goes around and says good morning. And she's like, well, just say good morning. I'm like, but I can't, because it takes energy, and I just don't have. It's fake.
Yeah. We have a Monday morning meeting that every Monday that starts with, tell us something good that happened during the week or the weekend, and most of the time I'm like, pass. It was just a normal weekend. I'm not going to invent something just for this kind of small talk.
Exactly. And some of the stuff you're like, why? I don't want to share. Like some of the things are just like personal and personal. So whether we want to, why do I have to share? And some of that, and I know from some of the experiences, it just makes me just like, it's embarrassing, and it's like you're being put on blast. Like, okay, well, Justin's not coming up with something, or he's saying that he had a great time at this trade show, but you don't sound like you had a great time. I'm like,
well, the very
all the
fact that you
boxes
got yelled at for it is terrible. It should be,
yeah,
it should be voluntary.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm working with the employees. We're supposed to come up with goals for the year, and kind of loosely. And I'm working with a few of them on things, behaviors and stuff that one of them thinks that they're slow at work.
Yeah.
Actually getting things out, and they're really not, but they have a perception that they are. And of course, somebody has said, "Well, they're really slow at that." They're just very methodical, and they have these stumbling blocks of stress that happen when they're trying to anticipate what their boss is going to say, or the project manager, is going to actually say, why did you do it this way, or why you shouldn't have done it this way. Yeah. And so they get paralyzed a little bit.
Right.
Which is a stress point. And so I think going forward, for a long time now, I realized I just want to reduce stress. I think people get addicted sometimes to that cortisol going through their body, where they like the stress, or they just can't live without it. Maybe they don't like it. I just don't want it.
Yeah.
So
there's nothing wrong with that. That.
So I like working at home right now, and I'm sure they're paying rent on a building. I'm sure my boss would love it if everybody just came into the office. Right. I like where I'm at. I like working at home with my own bathroom, my own food, and my cat. I don't want to have to go back into the building. I find that stressful. Yes. So I'm just not going to do it.
And you're doing your work,
so
you're getting all the things done.
Yeah, I'm just not in that.
Yeah,
space.
physically in there, and I, it's like, okay, well, come on in and show your face, some of the politics, go do fundraisers, and it's like, wait, I'm gonna pay this much just to see somebody show up for 30 minutes, and I think some of it with how work got through COVID, how work can still get done have to have the systems in place and security and that to make sure that hackers and from that. But if you're able to do your job, why does it matter where you're really at?
Yeah.
Like
I
is
find
it
it
that
very
power
limiting.
thing?
Yeah.
Yes.
We just had one of the employees was very afraid because they sold their house and moved down to Columbus to be closer to their family. And now that she's going to be having a baby. And so she was worried, am I going to have to quit my job just because I'm moving to Columbus? Right. And we're like, no, because you're going to be on Teams or Google, all these different, we have all this software and the ability to work and do work from home. There's no reason why you have to live right here, which now I think, we've narrowed ourselves down too much. Now we could hire people in different time zones and different cities, and it just opens up that pool so much more.
Exactly. Take some, if they end up selling the building, and you use some of that for those employees, and we're only working Eastern time during these hours. Well, you could add on an employee here or there that are in those different time zones that answer those questions or be that point person, and okay, I can answer 50% of what could possibly come up, and then the person will come in tomorrow and address some of the bigger things.
I mean, it's like we're doing architecture, so there are drafting services out there, and a lot of times they'll do the drafting, and then you come in the morning and there's the drawing. So that we could easily work that way.
So how did you get into the field and the industry from a work standpoint?
Yeah.
I know a lot of my students are like, well, if I go into this major, do I have to stay in it? And you get some people like, okay, well, I'm waiting tables, and I got this master's degree or I'm in the gig economy, I'm driving Uber or Lyft, and all those things, depending on where you're at, different cities and how that makeup is. But from just like your experience, maybe there's a person or somebody has a child or knows somebody that is in those phases. So what drew you to yours, and what keeps you
into it?
I'm
not sure what keeps me into it, other than I just had poured everything into it. That is the lane I'm in.
Yeah.
Actually, I can easily trace it. My grandmother, as I'm a little kid, gave me Lego sets and kept saying, you should be an architect. So we had I don't know if they still do this, but in school at the time, this is back in the late 60s, early 70s, they had these little tests, I can't remember, scholastic aptitude tests, I think. And it always asked, what do you want to be? So I always wrote architect. And I remember one time a school counselor, I think it was sixth grade, said, we've got your, these for every single year, and you've always written architect, where other people, other kids have gone, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a football player, I want to do this. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. So I stayed, very focused. I stayed on that all the way up through college, and that's what I'm doing. And then at one point, I went to sit for the exams. I sat for one and didn't do that well on it, and thought, architecture field is so weird. You never really have to stamp a drawing unless you're the head of the architecture firm, which I have never been. Okay. So I've never had to stamp a drawing. I don't see any reason to have to pay all that money for it. I didn't really want to take any more of the tests. So finally I'm like, and I'm still doing the work I wanted to do. So I thought, I really don't think, I'm not going to be an architect. I'm going to work for an architecture firm and go from there. It's worked out. I will just at some point retire and get away from it. It is not a passion, though. I like design, I like interiors, I like buildings, but it's not something that I find fun or
you don't have that emotional tie to it. It's not.
Yeah, I can leave it very quickly.
Leave it very quickly.
Which I'm so glad that we started up, like the drag thing, or the. I forgot. We're also going to be having a stand-up comedian thing where I'll be hosting it, but it's not a drag event really. So hopefully, we'll keep expanding those kinds of things, and that'll take more of my time away.
And that'll fulfill that. Yeah.
I have noticed over the years. When I would be doing work that was very, very technical, that creative side of me was kind of dying, and I'd find that was when I would paint and draw the most, or even sculpt.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was in a job or a project that was very creative and I really had to use those creative chops, I didn't do any artwork at all. So yeah, you have to fulfill the sides of you that need it.
And that's good that you've realized that, and sometimes hindsight's 20/20. Is say, oh, well, that's why at that time I did that because I wasn't getting fulfilled on this side or that side. So your Lego. So you still do Lego. You still do that like to this day. And
oh yeah.
is that part of that creative? I mean, because these aren't like small like Lego sets that you're building.
They're expensive.
They're expensive. And they're very nice, great looking when they're done. It's like, oh my god, like I can only do like a portion of it. And you're like, okay.
It's an expensive hobby, and there's a little bit of guilt in there because that's a lot of money to spend on things, and I've always been fairly good at compartmentalizing that compulsion of collecting. We, at one point, 2 decades ago, when Star Trek was at its height, I think, series-wise, probably late 90s, there were action figures out there for everything, and of course, each action figure had many different iterations and things you could buy for accessories and all that kind of stuff. And I said, no, I don't need them. I'm not going to buy them. They're cool, but I'm not going to buy them. And then I think it was for one of the holidays one time, my husband found the ones from Voyager, the series, and got me like the 12 action figures that they started out with. So now I had those. Well, that meant now I'm collecting.
Yeah.
But I could compartmentalize and say, I will only collect Voyager. Until at some point I got something else in it. Then I was able to expand it. The same as with Lego. I have only certain Legos. I don't collect Star Wars Lego because that's a huge, giant thing. And there's whole parts of it I can step away and go, I'm not having.
What? So I guess what kind of the Lego sets do you like? And when
they every year they come out with a modular set, which is an architectural building with interiors and everything.
Oh, wow.
Those I always get. This year was the jazz club with a pizza parlor next to it.
What's the hardest part of that? Like when you have the interior, the exterior, is it the shape of the pieces or?
No, I think I don't know that there's really anything difficult about it. They have an age thing on the box, 3 to 6 years old and 6 to 12 or whatever. I think kids could easily put them together, but it's more. And then I've laid them out in a big city with roads and cars.
Yeah, I mean,
it takes up a huge amount of room. Yeah, like I said, there's a little bit of guilt. We had a very close friend who runs a charity that we have donated to before, but they came to the house and they saw all this and they were like, ooh, that's so much.
Yeah, you like doing it.
Yeah, I do.
And
it's guilty pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of jealous because those are the types of things like I like seeing it, but like once I get started, it's like, oh my god, like even just like a puzzle, like I like doing it. I like the idea of it, and it gets a little bit creative for me, aside away from the technical aspects. But yeah, when getting started, like Charlene, she's big into puzzles. I mean, and she's great, and it's like I just wish I had like a little bit of that. So because then it's like, do I sit and when she and Rosemary are like going and they're working on it, and like, well, Daddy's not doing it.
Do you
like,
have hobbies?
Music, playing music.
Okay.
And this was my hobby of kind of helping in just little ways, and then finding myself and the mental health led me to like, okay, I have an event, and then like, do I want to do more? And then it's this organization. And I'm bad at asking, with it being a charity, like asking for money, and it's like, oh, charity, they're always asking me for money. Like the conversation's fine, and then it's like money. It's like, you don't have to donate. Like I'm just kind of letting you know, like here's what we do, and here's what we're trying to do, and try to have some goals. And and Charlene gives me hard times. You're like, you're so you say you're come from being narcissistic, all about yourself, and then like all I see are posts of like you doing media, and the organization. It's like, well, I've never had like a multi-million-dollar organization, so I don't know like what. You got to do something and reach out and see what hits, and I mean, even with the podcast we're doing now, and being able to do it in front of television cameras and getting it to a broader audience of just even finding out it was even an option of how things just happen. I was like, oh, okay, like I like doing it, and from a cost and time versus what I also was doing it another way. I was spending a lot more money doing it and getting kind of half of the product, and now it's like, wow, like this opens up, and it helps the community, and then it helps the people that are coming on and be like, hey, like I knew I was coming on a podcast, but I didn't like know it was like this, and so I even though I taped 3 episodes today, like it's still like fun, and I still have like the energy.
That is the good thing, yeah. That's what it is. When you're doing the creative things, I think you get that energy, that there's something in it.
Yeah, and so trying to, me and Charlene, and like having that dynamic of, we have that creativeness, but it's just like it comes in different ways and areas. And when she talk about designing buildings and all of the, like I think it's cool. I just don't like. I can't wrap my mind, because I have to like know like all the ins and outs of it. And if I don't have the time, or I'm not gonna be able to, it's like, oh, okay, like I'm just gonna kind of do my thing. But then we're trying to like explain like those creativities, and we're just like, okay, we kind of like have that respect of like, okay, like what you're doing, it's working for you, for what. Fulfilling that creativity side, and so that's obviously with relationships, there's always always something, and
that's 2 different people, so that always has something. I read your book.
Thank
I
you.
thought it was great. Hearing somebody's personal journey is always interesting to me. My family I'm blessed from, other than the diabetes and the heart and stuff, I do have evidently good brain chemistry. My mother and father were just always bubbly and having fun. They were the greatest people to go to Disneyland with on the West Coast when we were there. My sister and I both share that, and my sister in fact had gone to a marriage counselor, and with her husband, that they were forced to do for the church, and then they're also adopting and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, long story short, she was there, and the doctor was saying, well, there's obviously some trauma in your past that maybe makes you who you are. My sister's like, I don't think I had any trauma. She's like, oh, you're suppressing it then. So talk to your older brother, maybe he remembers something. So she called me up, and I'm like, what's she looking for? There's nothing there.
Yeah.
But the funniest part was, the therapist actually said, well, this isn't a Disney movie. You don't hold up your finger and birds light on it. And my sister's husband started laughing. He goes, that's a terrible example, because my sister actually did find this robin on the ground,
oh my God,
hand fed it. And from then on, generations of these robins would, if she went out into the yard and held her finger up, they'd come to her. But, and that's just kind of a synopsis of our mental things. I don't know if you're familiar with Bob Newhart, the comedian.
Oh, yeah.
He used to do record albums and stuff, and they redid one of his skits on Saturday Night Live recently, where I think it's hilarious. He plays a therapist, and an unusual therapist, and somebody comes in, they're like, I've got the fear of being buried alive. Everywhere I go, I'm paralyzed. I can't work or do anything because I'm going to get buried alive. And his answer to it is, well, cut it out. You're not going to get buried alive, so stop it.
Yeah.
And that's the whole skit. It keeps on going like that. And in many ways, in my past, I've thought that because I haven't had deep depression or any of these other kind of episodes. And so I'd think, well, just snap out of it. What is wrong with you? Why can't you just do something? Not understanding, there's chemicals and there's all sorts of things, that impinge upon it. So long story short, I enjoyed the book.
Thank you. Yeah, and and that's how I was a person before. It's like I can handle everything, I can do it, and then once work and certain things started like the eating or not eating and losing weight. Once like those types of things, I was like, okay, like it's a little bit. And now like even when I was admitted, they asked if I was like suicidal, and I was like, no, I'm not. Like I'm not. I don't have a plan. And they're like, but look at like all these activities you're like withdrawing from, and your body's kind of shutting down, and it was. I mean, I don't know what it was. I mean, going to different doctors, and I don't know if the doctors could see like, well, he's not ready to accept it, so like we're just going to say he's like, he can go see whatever specialist in 2 months, and I'm like, I don't know if I can make it 2 months, and I mean there were times where I mean since we obviously both know Charlene, she's like, why are you like. Why are you crying when you're waking up? And it's like to talk about like those things, like, oh, okay, and like in a very public manner, and not only about myself but about a spouse. So like sometimes there are just dynamics of like if I wouldn't have gone through it and kind of accepted it myself, since my family and me hadn't gone through anything similar, it was kind of like. He's telling us to call the emergency squad, and he's just having a panic attack. And the squad comes, and they're like, "We're not going to take you because they're just having a panic attack." And what's going on? And it wasn't until like these things, I'm like, I'm literally gonna like if I'm not accepted into the hospital, because they're like, well, we can't just accept you into the hospital and just start doing like random tests. There's got to be like a reason, and it was tough. I mean, we were just married, not even 6 months, and I'm like, what do I do? And that was like the first time they brought like the psych staff in the emergency room, and I was like, oh, I can handle everything, and I was like, what do I do? She's like, well, it'll only be a couple days, and but do whatever you think, and I'm like, all right, that is a CAT scan of my or what I think the scan that looks inside like your stomach. You put like the dye in and look to see if like because I was like, oh, there's something wrong with my stomach. Well, I'm not eating, and my body's rejecting food, and so that's why my stomach is hurting. And so they did all that. They did all the blood tests. They're like, well, you're not dying right now. So we can either leave or you can do this. I'm like, I don't want to be one of those people. I can't have like a bell, like they're taking like my shoelaces, and I'm like, I'm not suicidal, and so those were like things just to like get over like myself.
Sure.
Like if I need to take medication, if I need to see someone, and I just will. And alcohol and things for me, it was just so big in my life at that. Such a big part of my pie, like if I'm going to do something, like, oh, well, I got to drink a lot before, or I'm traveling, so I need to drink on the plane, and I don't care if it's a 6 a.m. flight, like I'm going to have a couple, and those were like kind of like my coping mechanisms of when I would find myself, and so that's where I thought I was an extrovert, and I was talking to my psychiatrist, and he goes, oh no, he's like, you're an introvert. He was like, what do you do kind of like in like your spare time when you're just kind of like hanging out, like when? And I'm like, well, I like to take naps and just kind of like relax and read. And he said, see, like you're an introvert. He's like, you can turn it on at like certain times, because I'm like, well, I teach, and I'm in front of groups, and all those things that I had thought, and it was just a misconception. So once I was told that, I was like, okay, like here's somebody like with education, and like sees me kind of like from the outside, not that's in my head, and I'm like, how do I look? And like, you look fine. Like, are you just saying that because you're my wife, because you're my mom, you're my dad, and it's because it was inside, and it was like, oh, you look fine. You don't have any bruises, and anyways, to get off the topic a little bit, but about that, and so sometimes family members, we love them, but then there's certain times where it's like, okay, I need to go to this appointment, or I need to do like these things for me. I need to unplug for an hour, whatever those things are. I think that's just helpful. And when you're explaining kind of finding that creative side and finding those things to fulfill that, that's kind of what you're doing in a way of finding a way of like this is what I like to do, and so I'm gonna find a way if it's at work, if it's not at work, and that's where I have to find myself with, okay, if I need to just take a breather, like it's okay, like I don't have to answer this particular email today. It can be tomorrow. I'll just put it on the calendar, respond to whoever, unless it's something that they have to know. If they're booking something, like that, have to know like right now by this time, because I'm like, well, I can just do it right now. It's easy. It doesn't take a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it's just another rumination and going down the rabbit hole.
It's still taking energy from you. I mean, regardless of how long it'll take. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where, I was saying I had problems with my father early on, and there were, certainly the discrimination and things like that he had, and that was mostly due to him being raised in rural Oregon. I have to blame it on that. But some of it, too, as I became a teenager, his extrovertness was an embarrassment. Walking in the mall and he'd just talk to somebody. I'm like, you don't know them. It's like one of those progressive commercials. You don't know them.
You don't know them.
Don't talk to that person. My dad liked to perform. He liked to be on, and just and he played the guitar and he sang, and all those things were terribly embarrassing to me. Because this was my dad. As I've gotten older, now I realize, well, I like to do that. All the time I walk in, I'm like, oh, what are you eating over here? And people are like, you don't know them.
Right, yeah. It's like those the commercials that are out, like your parents.
Exactly.
And, it's like, that's you don't know them, like that in the parking lot, like you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And I find a little bit of that now looking back kind of at my dad with, I mean, he reads at church, and there's been times where he's spoken in front of groups, accepted awards for my grandma's brother, where he was inducted in the county football hall of fame, and so his sister or cousins, they didn't want to be the one to talk. They're like, I'm not going to talk. Like I'll get the pictures, but I don't want to talk. My dad's like, oh, I'll talk, and so he prepared remarks and stuff, and he did that, and that's now kind of like thinking like those are like they're not exactly like what I like, but in a way they kind of are, in our own ways.
Right. Do you think he was perfectly comfortable doing that, or was it a struggle for him?
No, I think he liked to do it.
Yeah.
And then so when I had him and my mom on the podcast, and my mom's like writing notes, and she's like, when is it exactly are we taping, and what topics, and then my dad, and he came and he had they both were prepared, but and he talked I remember him talking at the event, as far as how he was speaking and just in the tone and the manner. I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's a little bit of things that I've gotten from my, family, and it doesn't have to be exactly like them. It's just we take kind of how feel in situations. Like, all right, I like to do this. I don't know why, and maybe I'll find out why at some point. But if it's helpful and I'd like to do it, and it's not like breaking the law, those types of things,
Absolutely.
Not going to bankrupt the family.
Right.
Okay, do you have to do that? No, but it's not going to bankrupt the family. But if you do enough of them, maybe, maybe, enough $50, Facebook ads or whatever.
Well, it's the same, like our, it's going to be these events that we're doing, the first few, we were buying all the prizes for bingo.
Oh, yeah.
We were paying the entertainers, which we still do.
Yeah.
We have a commitment where we make certain they're paid first. Mm-hmm. If we don't sell many tickets, that's just all out of our pocket. And so the first few times, we were in the red, and then we got to where we're breaking even, and now we have enough of these things, and I think there's enough impetus and enough advertising that people are starting. Our brunches usually sell out, which is a good thing. I would love it if our bingo also sold out.
Also, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a Wednesday. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't necessarily go out on a Wednesday, but this is something they can do. So
what do you think the marketing that has been what has kind of push to get you to where you're at and continuing
and
to
word of
grow
mouth
and word of mouth.
Absolutely,
Say, hey,
yeah.
I went and did this, I participated,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next week or the next month.
Right. We're on, excuse me, Instagram and Facebook and that kind of stuff, and that certainly helps. But I go around and ask people, how did you hear about this? It's usually word of mouth, or I'm surprised how many of them see a poster. We put them in coffee shops and places where people just happen to be, and they saw the date, thought this will be a fun thing to do, and
no kidding,
just come to it. Yeah,
that's that. It's
old fashioned.
It's old fashioned, and it works. And you're asking the consumer, the customer, of how they found it. And so you're like, okay, well, this is working.
Yeah.
We'll still work on this, and this might help incrementally, kind of.
Right.
And then
Right.
you bring the pictures in and tag in people, and they look like your events look like they're like a good time. Like
They
people
are
are like
fun.
enjoying themselves.
Yeah, we just had one on last Sunday, and one of the performers, Monica Lexon, did a third number for us and came out and did a showgirls. I'm a terrible gay. I don't know musicals and stuff, but I don't like them. But she did a song from Showgirls and did this, had a full gown, gigantic hair, did this thing, and then disappeared behind the curtain. And when she came back out, had stripped that off and had this dance harness kind of thing on, and a big contraption, and a different wig. I think it was underneath of her other wig.
Okay.
Because she was like that. And then the music tempo came up, and there was this crescendo, and she was dancing, and people were on their feet.
Oh my God.
And two different people told me they actually burst into tears just because it was just such a spectacle.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I would love that. That's amazing.
That is, yeah, because you're really hitting people like on that
Yeah.
super emotional level, and that's probably going to bring them back, and where that word of mouth kind of comes from,
And I was helping her collect the money. People give dollars as tips, and or sometimes fives and others, and we have little baskets for them so they don't just fall all over the floor. And I was bringing back baskets after that, just dumping it. I was like, this is amazing.
That is, yeah, and that gives you like ideas to going forward. Like, okay, you know what, this did very well. So let's think of how we integrate that.
Yeah.
So it's really any type of a business or marketer. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. It's kind of like you said. It's kind of like operating a business to find what's working, what's not. You start where okay, here's where we think we need to start, and then over time you're getting your different intelligence from the consumers, and then just continuing to grow, and that's something that I'm finding with our organization is to try to continue to build that, and so to get other ways. And so I haven't thought about the coffee shops and those. I'm like, who's gonna I'm the person that you were talking about at work that is going through something, and they're, instead of just going through a particular project and doing it, it's like they get to a certain point, they're like, okay, but Justin's going to say this, so I got to do this, and knowing whether they say it or not, it doesn't matter. They're just going okay, I got to go this other direction, and they start doing those things, and that's where I'm some of the ideas where no, who sees those, and but there's so many, and then I get in do I do a card or a flyer, and then how big? I just need to go ahead and do it.
Yeah. And you never know. I think sometimes it's a gamble. We decided, and I thought it was a really good idea. We had decided to create little lapel pins, like this one's of me. You can't see it; it's too tiny on there, I'm sure. But that one's of me. But we made one for each of the different performers, and we were saying they're $5 a piece. If you buy a bunch, there'll be less. And I thought people were just going to be like, oh, give me those. Nobody wanted them. So it's okay, we tried.
You tried it, and
probably we won't do that one again, but we'll try, do other things. And
maybe that cycles around where it gets to the point where people are like, remember those pins you had last year?
Yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. And you already have that supply chain of who you go to, and are the photos taken, and all that. Yep, let's just put that in and let's
Yeah.
do that.
I had made stickers, and people loved those, but I was handing those out for free. But
Yeah.
then maybe if we
Makes
just
a
handed
huge
these
difference,
out
yeah.
for free, that
Yeah.
probably
We
would have
kinda
been
get
different.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can people find out about your events? Follow you.
Sure.
You want to share that so the
Yeah.
audience can get in touch and
Right.
and potentially be a participant of your
So
concept.
it is our calendar and different events stuff are posted on UncleLuluPresents.com.
And it's LU.
LU.
Okay.
Yeah, Uncle Lulu, all one word, Uncle Lulu Presents. Uncle Lulu, the name was actually taken from, it means something in like Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of Uncle Lulus there. So that's the main website. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. My drag persona, Candy Dish, that's DYSH, is on Instagram. And I believe we have just Uncle Lulu in Facebook, but I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Okay. That's what
Uncle Lulu is definitely on Instagram as well.
Okay. And that's the overarching, and then get into the personas as far as
Kind of, yeah.
if
I mean,
people
it'll
want
at
to
least-
find out like at the what's going on specifically Uncle Lulu's.
That's when we'll post photos and stuff from past events and also posters for the upcoming ones.
And it's a calendar. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything we didn't cover that? I mean,
We were all over the place.
Yeah, we're all over the place, but I mean, it's all relevant. It's just having that human connection and talking about things that are going on and how different us as individuals. Like there's certain things that one person likes, somebody does, and it's just really about finding that for them, the individual, and say,
Sure.
yeah, like I'm interested or I'm not, and maybe this is why, and sometimes just informational, to hear people laugh, see people laughing, and
Oh, yeah.
like just stuff that we like overlook because we're like so in, speaking for myself, so in like the details and in the weeds. I'm like, that's not funny. Like when's the seed gonna produce fruit? I'm like, I'm planting all these seeds and I'm talking to my class. I'm like, I need to, like, I'm the instructor, and I'm like, I'm having this like talk, and it's, like when you plant the seed, like you don't eat the fruit the same day, but it's like this mental talk that I'm really giving to myself, but like I'm saying it to my students, kind of like that therapy of like, sorry, like for the next 15 minutes, I'm just gonna kind of.
Well, and hopefully, it's also kind of a networking thing. We actually met with some people that might want want to do some drag things at their space, and it's because their bartender had been to one of our drag brunches, loved it, came to them and said, this could be fun.
Yeah.
So.
And then then there's just, say like it can go to infinity. Like which direction can go? Partnerships and work with. It's like, hey, like this is kind of what we're doing, and as long as the numbers work, and people are having fun and enjoy doing it, and why not see where it goes? And I think that especially for the audience, it's just. Sometimes we just try things, and sometimes they're gonna work, sometimes they're not, and sometimes
it's like half of my jokes.
Yeah,
half of them they groan.
Yeah,
the other half they'll laugh.
It's like, can somebody just tell me which ones? Like I know, like I'll take these ones out, because I'll get those questions a lot. Like, what do I do, and like when do I start, and is it a conflict of interest? Like. Some things are only a conflict of interest when you get to a certain size. Like the IRS isn't going to per se like be like all into like the details of auditing. If you're pulling in $100 a year or $200, I mean, obviously I'm advocating to do your taxes, and so this is I'm not a certified public accountant. So anybody's listening, this is not financial advice. But sometimes questions come in, students, their thing is so big, and it's like, well, like, don't take that energy now to think. I mean, think and have those creative ideas. Like, here's like my big idea, but where I've gotten caught is thinking about like all the details of like what's out here instead of like, why don't I just like focus on right here, but
Right.
the here and the now. Like it may never get there, or the they might come in a different form, and it might be already there before I have a chance to think about it. It's like, you know what, we don't know. Just do what we enjoy doing, have fun, and really, you know, just kind of live life, and kind of get into the stress of the employee. It's just adding energy, positive, negative energy that could be spent doing nothing or could be spent doing something important. But when there's, you know, all that negative energy, and you're talking about like, you know, I just want to lower stress.
Absolutely.
Like that's what I want to do, and
I mean, that's why we feel so good on vacation.
Yes.
And going to a tropical place and laying around is because
Thank you
we've
for
lowered the stress.
Lowered stress.
And we enjoy that and think, oh, I could live here. Well, you're not working there. You're not having to buy groceries there. You should probably,
And then
That's
it's like
the
coming back
stress.
to the reality. It takes so long because it feels like so relaxing of just like, wow, like this was like, it takes me usually a couple days to get into that. Like I'll be on vacation and take a couple days and like, okay. And then once I'm there, it's like, I don't want to go back to the regular
absolutely.
world. I don't want to go to the hustle bustle. Like I'm going to change what I'm doing in certain instances and make things less stressful.
Yeah.
And then I always go back to kind of like, not all the way back to exactly how I've been, but you know, some things are like,
we can
I'm only going to
into
look at my
cycles.
Yeah, I'm only look at my phone like only a couple hours a day. Like, yeah, that works for the first maybe week if you get that long, and then after that, it's like, oh crap, I find myself doing these things. And, well, thank you for being on, and really excited following. I mean, everything from the events that you have to the persona in the event, and then I really enjoy like the Legos. Like, it's only like maybe like a once a year type thing. Yeah, like, and you never know until like people like, I didn't know that person watched this interview and they're putting a post out there. Like like I didn't know. Like they took a picture of their screen. Like so that was like legit.
Yeah.
You just never know. So I guess I'm the Lego like stalker.
Well, I'll post more.
Yeah.
We keep talking about we're going to do little like clips of some of the characters in there, and maybe make up a little story for them.
Yes.
I don't know. Who knows?
If you,
Something fun.
Yeah. I'll check it out. You got at least one person.
Yeah.
Like,
Good.
Yeah. Well, thank you to our audience, to our listeners, our viewers, for watching this episode and joining us on the Voices for Voices podcast. Again, a very special thank you to our guest today, Bud Perry, for sharing his time, his experiences, his journey, and hopefully a couple laughs for you. So until next time, I am Justin Allen Hayes, founder and executive director of Voices for Voices, host and humanitarian. Have a great day and be a voice for yourself or somebody in need.